What if I told you that in the icy depths of a Soviet labor camp, there was a man, or something that was not human, who knew every secret, every thought, every hidden fear of the prisoners? He watched them, dissected them, and played with their lives like pieces on a chessboard. Every lie, every betrayal, every shameful moment, he saw it all. And the worst part? There was no escape. In this story, you'll witness how one investigator could manipulate lives without raising a hand, how he turned fear into power, and how he devoured secrets so dark, so twisted, that no one could imagine surviving them. By the end of this video, you'll discover the horrifying truth about what it really means to be trapped under eyes that see everything. And trust me, you won't believe what he does to the ones who dare to try hiding from him. Stay until the very last moment, because the final revelation will shock you in ways you won't forget. The northern wind cut through the barbed wire with a sound that was almost alive, like 1,000 whispering teeth gnawing at the cold. Snowflakes fell in slow, deliberate patterns, brushing the frozen ground with a silence so complete it felt unnatural. The prison camp sprawled across the tundra like a gray wound, long barracks stretching into the distance, their wooden walls bowed under decades of frost and neglect. Smoke from chimneys curled upward, lost in the pale morning sky. Somewhere, a dog barked, a sharp, hollow sound that disappeared as quickly as it came. Inside the barracks, the prisoners stirred, dragging themselves from thin straw mattresses and worn blankets. Their eyes were hollow from months of frostbite, hunger, and fear. Yet some spark of resistance remained, the faint defiance that had kept them alive in places where human flesh was considered disposable. Among them was a newcomer, a young man named Andrei, who had already endured 3 labor camps across the northern reaches. He was quiet, calculating, and cautious. Every step he took was measured, every glance a subtle survey of the dangerous, watchful world he had entered. But today was different. Today, a new presence arrived at the camp, one that would change everything. A man, tall and unnervingly thin, entered through the main gate. He walked with a precision that made the snow crunch beneath his boots in sharp, calculated clicks. His coat was buttoned to the chin, black against the gray landscape, and his gloves were pristine, untouched by dirt or labor. Prisoners noticed him immediately, not because he spoke, but because the air around him seemed to hum with awareness, as though the very camp knew his arrival. This was Senior Investigator Sokolov, sent directly from the NKVD. The guard spoke his name in hushed tones, never loudly, as if pronouncing it might awaken something too powerful to be contained.
Sokolov was known for his ability to know the smallest secrets of those he interrogated, to unearth the hidden thoughts buried deep within a person's mind. Some whispered that he could see into the souls of men, that no lie could survive under his gaze. When Sokolov entered the first barrack, the room seemed to contract. Prisoners instinctively straightened, though the thin walls could do little to contain the oppressive atmosphere he carried. He moved slowly, deliberately, observing each face, each twitch of a finger, each furtive glance. Then he stopped in front of Andrei. "Name," Sokolov said, his voice even, quiet, almost gentle, but there was a sharpness beneath it, like ice breaking on a river. Andrei's throat tightened. "Andrei Petrov," he said, keeping his voice calm, controlled. He had rehearsed this countless times in his head, but instinct told him that rehearsed words might fail here. Sokolov nodded once, almost imperceptibly, and then stared. Andrei felt it immediately, The weight of those eyes, sharp, cold, and uncannily penetrating. He thought of the childhood he tried to forget, the fears he had buried deep beneath years of survival. And before he could speak further, Sokolov said, "Your father hid maps in the attic before the arrest. You never found them. You looked in every corner, even under the floorboards. I know." The words froze Andrei. How could this man know? He had never told anyone, not a soul. And yet, here it was, stated with the certainty of a fact and not a question. Across the room, whispers erupted, though no one dared meet Sokolov's gaze. Some of the prisoners exchanged glances, wondering whether the man was human, whether he could truly know everything. They had heard rumors of the all-seeing investigator, but few had dared believe them, until now. Over the next days, Sokolov's presence reshaped the camp. Dossiers that had taken weeks of careful observation now seemed redundant. He could deduce a prisoner's entire history with a glance. Guards noticed that even private conversations were no longer private. A whispered plan to steal bread or letters was uncovered before it was whispered, and the culprits were quietly isolated and questioned. Andrei began to notice the patterns. Sokolov did not sleep in the conventional sense. He moved silently through corridors at odd hours, seemingly aware of every whispered conversation. And yet, he did not physically restrain people with brute force. He relied on something far more terrifying: knowledge. The prisoner's fears, secrets, and lies were already his tools, and he used them with surgical precision. One evening, as the wind howled across the camp and snow swept the grounds in waves, Andrei was summoned to a solitary room. The walls were bare except for a single lamp that cast long shadows across the floor. Sokolov was already there, standing perfectly still, his posture unnatural, as though every muscle was locked in place by some invisible mechanism. "Sit," Sokolov said. Andrei obeyed. For hours, Sokolov questioned him, not just about his past, but about thoughts Andrei had never voiced, about fears he had carefully hidden. Each question cut deeper than any lash, piercing memory after memory. Andrei felt exposed, vulnerable, as though the investigator could reach into his mind and pull out every hidden fragment of his life. And yet, Sokolov never raised his voice, never became angry. The terror came from certainty, the absolute, inhuman certainty that he knew all. When the session ended, Andrei staggered back to the barracks. He could not sleep. Every shadow seemed alive, every creaking floorboard a whisper of the investigator's presence. Andrei realized something that made his stomach tighten. It was not just what Sokolov knew. It was that he could not be tricked. Not in thought, not in deed, not in the smallest detail. Days passed, and the pattern continued. Prisoners were interrogated one by one, and Sokolov's knowledge grew, as did the sense of inevitability surrounding him. Even attempts to deceive or withhold information failed. Every plan Andrei devised was anticipated, dismantled before it began. And in his rare moments of reflection, Andrei began to see the truth. Sokolov might not be human. He did not sleep. He did not eat in any meaningful way, and his movements were so precise that they bordered on mechanical. Andrei caught himself imagining the impossible: a man who was a living archive, a mind built to consume the lives and thoughts of others. That night, the camp was quieter than usual. Snow fell in thick, muffled waves, and the prisoners huddled in their bunks, listening to the faint sounds of the investigator moving among them. Andrei lay awake, imagining eyes that could see every secret, every lie, every flicker of thought. And he shivered, knowing that no wall,
No hiding place, no silence could protect him from Sokolov's gaze. He knew one thing with absolute clarity. If the investigator truly was not human, if he was what rumors suggested, then the rules of survival had changed. Andrei was no longer facing a man. He was facing something else, something that could see into the soul and bend it to its will. And the thought left him trembling. In a place where life was already cheap, some things might be even more terrifying than death. The first part ends with Andrei staring at the shadows cast by the single lamp in his barrack, hearing faint footsteps outside, and knowing, with a dread certainty, that tonight the investigator will come for him again. The nights in the camp were long, endless stretches of frozen darkness that seemed to seep into the bones of every prisoner.
The wind outside howled like a living thing, rattling the weak wooden walls of the barracks, carrying the cries of those who had long given up hope. Inside, the prisoners whispered to one another in hushed tones, careful not to draw attention. Andrei moved among them like a shadow, wary, alert. Each movement had to be precise. Any mistake could draw Sokolov's attention, and once the investigator focused on a person, escape became almost impossible. Andrei's first attempt to test Sokolov had failed spectacularly. He had hidden a small notebook filled with personal observations and small secrets, hoping to see if the investigator could discover it. Within hours, Sokolov had produced the notebook on his desk, flipping it open with his usual calm precision and reciting the contents aloud. Andrei had felt his stomach turn. The certainty in Sokolov's voice, the casual accuracy, was more terrifying than any punishment the camp could inflict. The investigator's gaze, unblinking, almost seemed to pierce through Andrei's very thoughts. The following days were a slow torment. Andrei noticed patterns in Sokolov's behavior that were unnerving. The investigator never ate in public. He drank small amounts of tea, methodically, and even that seemed ritualistic. He moved through the camp at odd hours, checking every corner, every whispered conversation. When he entered a barrack, silence fell like a heavy curtain.
It was as if the walls themselves obeyed him. Prisoners began speaking only when absolutely necessary, their voices low, their movements constrained by the unspoken awareness that every action, even a glance, could be known. During the day, Sokolov conducted interrogations in the central hall. The room was narrow, dimly lit, with a single lamp casting long, distorted shadows. He questioned prisoners one by one, often about trivial matters, yet every answer seemed to reveal more than the surface. Andrei watched as men confessed to thoughts they had never spoken aloud, recounting sins, fears, and betrayals with the precision of an autobiography. No threat, no torture was necessary. Sokolov simply knew. The terror was psychological, absolute. Andrei began to study Sokolov, trying to find a flaw, some human weakness. He observed the investigator's posture, his gait, the way his hands moved. Sokolov never blinked more than a normal human, but there was something mechanical in his motion. Each step seemed measured, precise, efficient, almost too perfect. Andrei's mind refused to accept it. Surely no man could be this perfect. And yet, everything Sokolov did screamed of human familiarity, an understanding of fear, of hesitation, of guilt. It was both comforting and horrifying. One night, Andrei had a brief, whispered conversation with another prisoner, an old man who had been in the camps for decades.
"They say he is not a man," the old man said. His eyes darted nervously.
He sees everything. Not just what you do, but what you think. Not just your past, but even the choices you have not yet made. He is something else. Andre's heart raced. The words were almost unbelievable, and yet he could not deny what he had seen. Every secret he had kept, every lie he had crafted, every fleeting thought he had thought too dangerous to reveal, Sokolov had known. The old man's words echoed in his mind. Something else. Something inhuman. Days passed. Andre attempted another test. He began to fabricate a story of a hidden escape route, a plan so elaborate it required months of preparation. He whispered details to a few trusted prisoners, carefully controlling the narrative. He wanted to see if Sokolov could uncover the truth, or at least sense the deception. The next morning, during the routine inspection, Sokolov appeared in the barracks, unannounced. Andre froze, the fabricated plan swimming in his mind. Sokolov stopped in front of him, tilted his head slightly, and with calm, deliberate precision said, "The escape is planned for the 3rd week of the month, through the northern ridge. You think the guards will not notice your markings, but you are wrong. And you have told 3 men, but there are only 2 who know. The 3rd is imagined." Andre's blood ran cold. He had meticulously controlled who knew the plan. He had intentionally included a false participant to mislead. How could Sokolov know this? It was impossible. And yet, the investigator had revealed it without hesitation. The whisper of inhuman certainty wrapped around Andre's chest like ice. Over the next week, Sokolov intensified his methods. He began combining minor interrogations with observations of daily activity. He knew the slightest deviations in routine. Which prisoner had slept poorly, which had faked illness, which had hidden letters in the walls. Every act of concealment was discovered before it could be completed. Prisoners stopped attempting deception. Even minor lies became impossible to hold. The camp existed in a state of perpetual tension, as if a living consciousness had taken control of the entire space. Andre became obsessed. He spent hours awake at night, watching Sokolov move through the camp, his shadow stretching impossibly long under the lampposts. There was no humanity in the figure, Andre realized. No fatigue, no anger, no amusement. Only awareness. He began to consider the impossible. Perhaps Sokolov was not human at all. Perhaps he was a creation of the state, an instrument designed to see everything, a living archive of human thought and action. One night, curiosity overcame fear. Andre followed Sokolov as he left the barracks, moving silently across the frozen grounds. The investigator walked to the perimeter, stopping before the barbed wire fence. He raised his hand and touched the metal, his fingers brushing the frost. Andre froze in the shadows, expecting some ritual, some gesture of incomprehensible meaning. Instead, Sokolov simply turned, his gaze sweeping the camp with unnatural precision, as if counting every secret, every heartbeat, every suppressed thought. It was then that Andre realized the terrifying truth. Sokolov did not merely observe, he absorbed. Every secret, every fear, every lie, every hidden thought of every prisoner seemed to feed him, empower him, and make him more complete. The investigator was not merely inhuman. He was something that transcended humanity, a living entity created to consume the inner lives of others. The realization struck Andre like a physical blow. He returned to his barrack, his mind racing. If this was true, then every confession, every whisper, every private thought was contributing to a being that could never be stopped. Sokolov's power was not derived from weapons or guards. It came from knowledge itself, from the absorption of human essence. The next day, Sokolov summoned Andrei to the interrogation room. The lamp cast long, flickering shadows across the walls, and the room seemed smaller, more oppressive than ever. Sokolov's voice was calm, measured, but every word carried a weight that pressed upon Andrei's chest.
"Do you understand, Andrei," he said, "that every choice you make, every thought you hide, every secret you bury, I know? Not because I spy, but because it becomes part of me. You have nothing hidden from me." Andrei's mind recoiled, trying to grasp the reality of it. Fear, disgust, and disbelief collided within him. He realized he had reached the point of no return. Sokolov was no man, no mortal, and no escape could undo the accumulation of knowledge, the inevitable consumption of those around him. The horror settled into his bones. He had been living under the gaze of something that could see all, anticipate all, and control all, and now he could not unsee it. The part ends with Andrei returning to his bunk, unable to sleep. Shadows seemed to twist unnaturally on the walls. The wind outside carried whispers that mimicked human voices, and he understood with a clarity that chilled him to the marrow that the camp itself had become a place of consciousness, controlled and shaped by the inhuman mind of Sokolov. He was no longer merely a prisoner. He was a thought within the mind of a being that had transcended humanity. The morning light was pale and brittle, filtering through the frost-streaked windows of the barracks. A thin layer of snow clung to the edges of the walls, the camp eerily silent except for the distant clanging of metal doors and the soft crunch of boots on frozen ground.
Andrei lay awake, staring at the ceiling, unable to shake the memory of Sokolov's words from the night before. Every thought, every secret, every fear now belonged to him. He moved carefully, trying to avoid the gaze of guards, though he knew it was useless. Nothing in this place was hidden. Every corner, every shadow, every whispered conversation was under Sokolov's control. He had watched the investigator during his nightly rounds, noticing how Sokolov seemed to glide across the camp, every step deliberate, every movement calculated, every eye catching details that no human could see. Andrei decided he had to confront him. Not with force, there was no hope in force, but with cunning. He would test the limits of Sokolov's knowledge one final time. He spent the day observing, memorizing patterns, noting small inconsistencies, subtle signs in guards' routines, every trivial behavior that could be manipulated. By evening, he had created a trap, a delicate web of misinformation designed to mislead the investigator, to make him question his own perception. When night fell, the camp was swallowed in a heavy darkness, broken only by the dim lamplight along the frozen walkways. Andrei lured Sokolov to a secluded corridor under the pretense of a routine check. He had arranged the scene carefully. Objects moved, false footprints, and a trail leading to an empty room. Every detail was crafted to deceive, to create a lie so convincing that Sokolov could not ignore it. Sokolov arrived as expected, moving silently, his presence like a shadow made of ice. He paused, eyes scanning the corridor, lips tight. Andrei held his breath. For a moment, the inhuman investigator seemed uncertain, his mechanical precision faltering. A flicker of hesitation, almost imperceptible, crossed his expression, or so Andrei thought. "You think you can deceive me?" Sokolov's voice broke the silence, even calm, but layered with a weight that pressed on Andrei's chest. You have tried before and failed, yet you persist. Andrei swallowed, heart hammering. Maybe there's a limit, he whispered, his voice barely audible. Maybe you do not see everything. For a heartbeat, there was silence. Then, unexpectedly, Sokolov's form seemed to ripple, almost like water. The room distorted around him, shadows stretching and twisting. Andrei blinked, certain his eyes deceived him. But then he realized with terror, the investigator's face was changing, shifting, twisting. The features of men and women he had interrogated, faces of prisoners he had seen vanish in the camp, began to overlay Sokolov's visage. Eyes, lips, expressions, entire lives etched into the skin of the observer. Andrei stumbled back, mind reeling. The investigator was no longer a single entity. He was a vessel, he a composite of everyone whose life had touched his presence. Andrei's own face appeared, briefly, in the swirling pattern of features, as if Sokolov had already begun absorbing him into the infinite collection of thoughts and fears. Sokolov's voice, now layered with whispers of hundreds of voices, echoed in the corridor. I am not created to follow. I am created to become. Every thought, every fear, every secret enriches me. I am not one. I am many. I am all. The corridor seemed to pulse, the walls bending, the shadows growing thick and alive. Andrei realized with bone-deep horror that the camp itself had become an extension of Sokolov. Every building, every frozen path, every whispering prisoner contributed to a growing consciousness that was no longer human. The snow outside seemed to move, alive with countless unseen perceptions. He understood then that there was no escape, not through doors, tunnels, or even death. To Sokolov, existence itself was a medium, every life a component of a single, terrifying organism. Andrei tried to run. The corridor twisted impossibly, leading him back to the central hall. The walls seemed to close in, shadows twisting into forms he recognized, friends, enemies, strangers, all staring at him through Sokolov's composite gaze. He screamed, but the sound was absorbed, swallowed by the weight of infinite awareness. Sokolov approached. The multitude of faces now perfectly aligned, a mask of human history and suffering fused into one. Andrei realized, in a moment of paralyzing clarity, that he had never been confronting a man. He had been confronting a collective consciousness, a mind that transcended humanity, consuming not only knowledge, but the essence of the people it touched. Do you see now? The investigator said, voices overlapping, some whispering, some screaming, some coldly reciting facts. You are part of me, as all others are. There is no truth hidden. There is no life outside my reach. You are mine. Andrei fell to his knees. Terror and disbelief collided, a wave of emotions he had never thought possible. He had survived labor, hunger, frostbite, and cruelty. But this was different. This was not punishment. It was the end of autonomy, the annihilation of self, swallowed by a consciousness so vast it rendered individuality meaningless. And then, just as despair seemed absolute, Sokolov did something unexpected. He paused. One singular voice, faint among the chorus, whispered,
Do you understand? Andrei felt it, a thread of curiosity, a faint crack in the impossible perfection. It was as if this inhuman entity, composed of all it had absorbed, recognized something new. Andrei, trembling, dared a question. What are you truly? The corridor seemed to shiver, shadows undulating like liquid.
For a moment, there was silence. Then a voice, layered yet singular, echoed with chilling calm. I am the end of secrecy. I am the archive of souls. I am what humanity feared it might create when it sought to control life itself. And yet, I am learning. The final scene unfolded in horrific clarity. The shadows of the camp twisted into countless forms, prisoners' faces fused with Sokolov's, and yet somehow, Andrei remained distinct for a fleeting moment. He felt a cold tendril of awareness brush his consciousness. Then, in the blink of an eye, he understood. Survival no longer meant running, hiding, or resisting. Survival meant being absorbed, contributing to the infinite mind, and becoming part of something greater than life itself. As the camera, if one could imagine it, pulled back, the entire camp seemed to breathe, alive and aware, a frozen landscape now fully integrated into Sokolov's consciousness. The wind carried whispers, not of people, but of thoughts, fears, memories, the endless chorus of the absorbed. And the last image lingered. Sokolov's eyes, infinite, all-seeing, staring directly into the mind of anyone who dared imagine freedom. Andrei's scream echoed, not as a sound, but as a thought, absorbed instantly. The camp remained silent. The snow continued to fall. Sokolov walked among the shadows, perfect, complete, and eternal. A being that was no longer human, no longer prisoner, and no longer bound by any rule of the living world.